Life events might occasionally cause us to reflect on our relationships, ideals, and behavior. This narrative is about a guy who experienced lies and betrayal, and how his desire for vengeance resulted in a sequence of events that altered his life and the lives of those he loved. Enter this realm of intrigue, treachery, and redemption. Every action has repercussions, and every choice has an impact on other people's lives in addition to one's own pleasure. Do you know who the most dangerous person is who has now realized the truth after being duped for years? Regretfully, I had no doubts whatsoever that my wife may cheat on me. Am I truly so blind? It's quite. The house is finally yours, but it's difficult to notice when everyone is against you and you're concealing a horrible secret. My lazy guy, I downed 2 cold beverages while watching the game on the large screen, and there is still more waiting in the tiny cooler. Someone is calling, and if it's a robocall or one of those obnoxious telemarketing calls, they're going to get a rude reception. It was around 8 p.m. On a Wednesday night, my spouse. I always plan for a night of leisure or to catch up on entertainment because Tracy frequently had to work late. Tonight, I had finished a Papa John's medium meat pizza and a few beers earlier, then sat down to watch the Cubs game. Savoring some more Coronas, I had 6 more in the refrigerator and 2 more in the cooler next to me. It looked like a terrific night in the kitchen. Tracy would usually arrive at around 10 o'clock, and we would have a little. Wednesday evenings were often rather calm, but this phone call was inevitable. Take a shower, and then curl up around 11. I knew my obligation when I responded, but it turned out to be Shell to disturb my tranquility. Jack had a heart attack while working with Tracy, and Tracy's boss's wife seemed quite upset. The lady who called informed me that he was taken to the hospital in critical condition by paramedics. Told me that Tracy had accompanied him, that Jack was in the ambulance, and that she intended to remain and would require a ride home later. I informed Shell that I would be on my way and wished her luck in Jack's recovery as long as she could. Had been Tracy's supervisor for 22 years, having begun her career at his software firm immediately after graduating from college. She had gradually advanced through the ranks to become his right-hand man and crucial partner, frequently referred to as his. When Tracy started working for Jack's firm, she was his right-hand lady and even his husband. Over the years, our families had the opportunity to spend time together, and Tracy and I were already dating. Spoke highly of Jacko, a Frenchman, saying he was a great employer who made sure she was paid properly. National, and is presently 55 years old, 10 years older than Tracy and myself. He exercises frequently to keep his body in shape, and he radiates charisma. Jacko is a true charmer. Regardless of gender, there is something about him that makes people want to be around him. I was shocked to learn about. I went to the front desk at the hospital after having his heart attack while parked in the visitor's spot adjacent to the emergency department. When I mentioned that I was Jack's wife, and that I was also trying to find her, the nurse saw 2 EMTs close by. I was perplexed when one of them made a mysterious comment about a cuck, but I immediately concentrated on locating Tracy. She and Shell came out of a room very distressed, and we exchanged a sad embrace as Tracy broke the heartbreaking news of Jack's. The 3 of us gripped firmly as I stood in shock, unable to speak, after passing away from a huge heart attack. Both ladies were sobbing uncontrollably in the corridor. Shell was a citizen, as were Jack and Jack. Had been married for 35 years, having married at the age of 20, and had relocated to the U.S. after Jack secured a position with an American software company. Amy, the daughter of the corporation at the beginning of the computer era, was 3 years older than my daughter Allison, who was 18. I might have easily mistook the girls for sisters because they seemed so identical. Jack loved Amy, but I couldn't aid, but I felt that this would be very difficult for her. One of the EMTs approached me and inquired if I was Tracy's spouse, acknowledged, and removed her purse from the ambulance. I greeted the EMT and shook his hand before beginning to place the bag strap aside. I spotted a strange object, a bra, in the center. Upon closer inspection, I discovered with the bra in the handbag and the women's frantic emotions as they left the room, I hadn't really. After giving Tracy's look a lot of thought, I realized that she was actually not wearing a bra. I wonder how much longer we spent with Shell at the hospital until she decided it was time to. Amy's departure was scheduled for the morning. Therefore, Shell would need to give priority to obtaining brought Tracy and I back to our house after driving Shell home, and I intended to assist both women in getting their automobiles the next day. Shell from the ER and Tracy's from her office lot. And when we arrived home, Tracy remained silent. She immediately proceeded to the main bathroom and showered, and after approximately 20 minutes, she joined me in the family room. She was seated on the sofa and appeared upset, her eyes red and puffy from crying. I left my She was breathing irregularly, and I could feel her body trembling with tears, so I rushed to join her and give her a strong embrace. Given that she was meant to be working with Jack, I wanted to inquire about the bra incident, but I held her for a further 20 minutes till she stated she couldn't bring herself to bring it up that evening, was exhausted and went to bed at midnight. So I made the decision to do the same the following morning because I had the day off, and I volunteered to drive Tracy to her office to pick up her car once she had showered. She appeared a little startled and found it difficult too. Before she could finish speaking, she requested me to accompany her to Shell's house so they could set up a. Tracy was going to drive Shell to the hospital to take care of Jack's belongings, so she arranged for a cab to take them to the office papers and get Jack's personal belongings. She claimed she didn't require my assistance, but I still volunteered, and it ended up being a smart plan as I needed to locate the EMTs who attended the incident the previous evening and speak with them regarding a. After leaving Tracy off at Shell's, I received a brief report on Shell's health and proceeded directly to the hospital. I was instructed to proceed to the fire station, where I discovered the identities of the EMTs that arrived yesterday night. I recognized the man who had given me Tracy's purse the previous evening. His name was Gage, and asked him explicitly when the emergency began, and once more, he had trouble answering. What do you think? My wife and Jack were meant to be picked up from the couch table, but you didn't, he said abruptly and suspiciously. Oh no, I didn't mean anything when you called me a cuck. Did you mean that? We've had cases when persons who checked into a hotel weren't who they claimed to be, he remarked, his voice rising. Take it easy, Gage. I'm not blaming you. I'm simply seeking the truth, which I had to find. When things go wrong, we're held accountable. Cook and was dissatisfied with what I discovered. That's not your issue. If you lie about where you picked him up, and we began our run at the West Side Hotel. Gage. About 15 minutes into the run, the man passed out and fell. On your wife, she had to push him away so she could phone, and in the interim, she gave him CPR. By the time we arrived, he was hardly breathing. I thanked each of them since I knew the truth and didn't need any further proof. And as I drove home, my mind was racing with the idea that Tracy had dated Jackie when I almost had a heart attack when I discovered that Allison and Amy were siblings. How could I have missed this before? Trusted Tracy and Jack for a long time. They frequently worked late, went on business trips, and spent time with friends. How could Shell have been uninformed of their affair all these times if they were together? Her occasional ignorance appeared improbable, especially in light of the striking resemblance. How could Tracy betray our girl since she'll frequently visited Jack at work and appear to be nice with her? Like this. Tracy was sipping wine in the family room when I arrived home. Despite my best attempts to remain composed, she inquired, "What's bothering you, sweet?" Her dissatisfaction must have been obvious. I was furious and asked, "How long have you been with Zach?" My voice was dripping with venom. "How could you say such a thing?" Allison's father, Tracy's, wine glass broke as she rang off of the couch in a fit. She yelled and accused me of approaching her with fierce rage. Could have killed her glance, which would have killed me right then. But I maintained my ground and met her eyes. Despite my resolve, I spoke in a barely audible whisper, yet my words were incisive. You can demand anything from me, but don't even try to tell me I'm mistaken. If you do, I'll make sure you're sorry. I've been married to her for 20 years, but I've never spoken to her in this way or threatened to harm her physically. How has she responded? Was one of complete surprise. Her mouth was hanging open as though she wanted to answer, but the gravity in. She was silenced by my manner. Perhaps sensing the intensity in my eyes, she moved away automatically. I watched her return to the sofa, ignoring the wine stain on the carpet, and I knew what you did. The stress of his death was likely caused by your affair and the physical strain, so I'm shocked it didn't occur sooner. How involved were you? She looked upset, so I knew I had touched a delicate subject. She looked down at me. Even though it was only 10 seconds, my hands were fidgeting for what seemed like minutes. Oh my God, do you think I'm accountable for his demise? I wonder if she feels that way as well. If she didn't know about you, why would she think that? Tracy occasionally joined us, but did she know and support us from the beginning? She thought it was appropriate for me to have sex with Jack, particularly when we were traveling for work, because he was essential to. She was pleased that I took care of him at work while she took care of him at home because of his business success. I sank into. I was the only one kept in the dark and felt lightheaded and confused. What about Allison? Allison has. I've known her for 4 years, and she's fine with it. Oh my goodness. Allison is aware that I said so. With it, but that wasn't my intention. Does Shell realize that Allison is Jock's child? Amy, she is aware of it and doesn't mind. I hope everyone laughed at my expense, even my daughter, who I assumed knew but chose not to disclose. Me fantastic, I stormed out of the house. I ended up driving to a nearby park and simply sitting there for a couple of hours. Tracy called me a couple of times, but I ignored the calls and let them go. To voicemail, I just sat and reflected. Despite considering myself, I felt pretty dumb about Tracy. I never even considered she might be cheating on me. I trusted her for nearly 19 years. I was clueless. I couldn't help but wonder if there were others besides Jack. My mind was flooded with thoughts as it began to darken. I left the park and headed home. When I got back, I noticed a faint light in the kitchen above the table. Tracy was sitting in her usual spot with a cup of tea. She offered me a cup, but I declined and opted for something stronger. I poured myself a scotch from my liquor cabinet and sat down opposite her. I really am sorry for hurting you, Tracy said softly, looking down at her hands. I need to hear the whole truth now, I replied, my voice tinged with frustration. You need to explain how you could betray me while claiming to love me. You need to tell me if you ever truly loved and respected me. Don't question my love for you, Tracy interjected urgently. I've always loved you, still do. It's just that I also love Jack. You might think you can only love one person at a time, but I know that's not true because I love too. Just get on with it, I said with no emotion. Tracy had joined Softwell when the company was nearly a year old. Like many small businesses, the small team wore multiple hats, worked long hours, and built intimate emotional attachments. It was a thrilling era for her, and she often highlighted the struggles while our dates. Our relationship had began approximately a year before she joined the firm. As it expanded and thrived, Tracy emerged as Jack's indispensable right-hand person, while Jacqueline represented the company's dynamic face. Jack's right-hand person, while Jackie represented the company's dynamic face, Tracy effectively acted as the glue of the power keeping things together. She was skilled at managing numerous duties, and Jack increasingly depended on her as his essential partner. Curiously, as Tracy and I became closer outside of work, the friendship between Tracy and Jack also deepened. In the office, Tracy realized that her personal and professional life seemed to be progressing in parallel, and their career and personal lives looked to be going in tandem. They were both quite professional in front of their coworkers, but they became even closer and started discussing anything from the ordinary to the intimate, include sex and politics. Tracy was incredibly gorgeous with an athletic figure and long blonde hair. When Jacko was he was a huge person with long wavy brown hair and a beautiful smile. He appeared like he was in his late 202s or early 302s. Jack was quite gentlemanly in the manner he handled her. Their first personal meeting came spontaneously on an old sofa in his office after a hard day. She claimed that she never felt guilty about being personal with both him and me. Even once she married me a year later, it wasn't simply physical desire. It was a profound love relationship, unique but similar to how she and I told Tracy everything, but she didn't feel comfortable sharing this part of herself with me. She loved both relationships and couldn't bear to give up either, since I was adamantly against cheating. Although I was unaware of the affair until around 2 months later, I understood that it would. Shaq felt compelled to tell his wife, who had just given birth to their first child, the truth. While she and Amy will always be his favorites, Tracy claims that Shaq, the youngster, informed Shell that he wanted to share his love for Tracy as well, inviting her to stay with Jack for the weekend. I recall Tracy departing for she said she had to go for the weekend because her mother was sick, but in reality, it was because her mother was She then said that it was acceptable for him to have the affair, and years later, when Tracy was expecting, Shell was the one who reassured her and made a decision. If the baby was Jack, it was simple to identify the father because both. I don't typically spend time alone with both daughters while they're by ourselves since Jock and I have a plus blood determining paternity. Together, Tracy or Shell would sarcastically brush off any comments on their similarity with a quip about my social. Tracy claimed that Shell treated her nearly like a younger sister and avoided any suspicion by doing this. Pride in what she referred to as Jack's small family. I listened in awe as Tracy described her life without. She seemed to have no regret for what she had done, only remembering what had happened. Tracy hesitated. I inquired whether she and Jack had ever taken a break when we were together, since I was at a loss for words and expected a response. We're just married, and when asked if they had been having sex nearly daily, she said that they hadn't, and that this was the time of my. She said that her life was so exciting that she had two handsome guys who coveted and adored her, and that she was always excited. She described her personal hygiene regimen for days when she was close to Jack, making sure everything was clean, but although she acknowledged the potential for careless seconds, she acknowledged that she was careful to minimize any crossing. She was really cautious to never let me have close touch after being with Jack, which I never understood. I had previously considered it, but after all this time, I've come to the conclusion that you both had comparable sexual performances. It wasn't about having better or worse sex with Jack. You were both terrific lovers who were considerate, loving, and of comparable size. It was just formed differently by each of you. And I quickly discovered that the endowed stranger wasn't only motivated by desire. I grew up believing in monogamy. Therefore, I was quite hurt to find out that she felt something for him in addition to me. Despite being the object of her primary intimacy, each person had one exclusive partner. Tracy, with whom she was sharing that relationship, put down her cup and looked directly into my eyes as though trying to examine my innermost thoughts. I reasoned that I was unsure of how to respond to her and how to interpret her remarks of. I didn't know why I was wise enough to put my glass in the sink and my whiskey bottle in the cabinet before retiring to bed, completing it. But I was very certain that I wouldn't sleep that night. 5 minutes later, Tracy entered the bedroom and curled up against my back. I woke up at 5 o'clock in the morning because I was too exhausted to say good night. This morning I completed my. Tracy was still asleep when I went for work after our regular morning ritual, so I assumed she wasn't going to Saul. After Jack left, she and D-Shell will need to work things out. But that's their issue. I had other things to consider. Because my job has always provided me with solace in trying times, and I hoped that this would continue. At 45, I am the new breed in the industry as the Vice President of Sales at Mayon Pharmaceuticals. I have a background in chemistry, therefore I have a deeper understanding of the manufacturing processes and features of our products. Compared to many of my sales leadership colleagues, I really contributed to the creation of one of our popular products. Crawl is a product that has been used to lower women's libido and those who have excessive sexual desires. A profitable business for us, and I have personally profited from its success. I also receive a sizable income and, together with Tracy's salary, we were happily residing in an opulent house in a chic neighborhood, had wonderful vacations and automobiles, and neither of us would have to pay for them after the divorce, which I had been avoiding the term, but there it was. I hadn't given it any attention before then, maybe because I thought it was inevitable because Tracy had cheated on Allison, who was currently attending college and living away from home. There is no need for us to remain together because Tracy shattered my heart, although it is rather unfortunate because Errol Kramer is my employer, and I've worked with him for 18 years following 5 years. I met Ari at an industry event while working as a scientist for another pharmaceutical business, and we had a conversation, discussing several subjects. He advised me to get into sales and then extended an offer of employment to me, which I found appealing. Ari was correct about my skills in the challenge, so I took the initiative and we've both profited from it. We have a effective working relationship. We get along well, but I've also found that he's a really decent. Ari and his wife Lauren have been married for almost 30 years, and I anticipate that our relationship will last a lifetime. Despite being 52, he has 5 grandkids and 2 grown children. The vitality of a much younger person, he's incredibly astute, and doesn't think twice about involving other bright individuals in his. When I informed Ari about Tracy's adultery and my choice, he became rather worried. I like to think of myself as a member of that team. When he asked if I was certain she had cheated on me before we had a divorce, I said that I was, and he was pleased for me to accept as much as. He did provide me with the contact information for the attorney representing Mayon REI, but I wanted time to consider the situation. Has great faith in the Mayon team, particularly in their ability to perform effectively, and cherishes loyalty to people who work well for him. He advised me to take as much time as I needed and stated he could assist me with my financial circumstances after the divorce required, but I reassured him that I would only be gone for brief periods of time and would only be gone sometimes. Moments since the situation was simple, and we both wanted to act in our daughter's best interests. I didn't know that Allison and I could simply divide the money from the property sale because we had different pension plans. Tracy had already had supper when I came home from work that night, so I prepared for the evening and cooked. I couldn't force myself to tell myself that I was enjoying a spaghetti supreme and a good bottle of Mio since everything felt so hopeful. I had a few drinks, but I was attempting to maintain my composure when I told her that Jack was the wine expert I favored. Tracy continued her typical upbeat conversation at dinner, acting as though nothing was wrong, in order to balance several relationships. Waited for around 10 minutes before breaking through the facade and ultimately saying those words because things had changed between us. "We need to talk, but we don't," she snarled, using the 4 words I feared. Returned very instantly, and I was surprised by her tone and reaction. I learned that she had been having a. She knew how strongly I felt about cheating because of her decades-long affair with her employer. How could she ask me to forgive her? I was expecting that before I filed a lawsuit, we could have an adult conversation about this. She said, "You love me." I calmly answered, "You can do whatever you want, but I'm not giving you a divorce. I will fight you every step of the way because I love you and you're being stupid and putting yourself in danger." I started to respond, but she cut me off before I could say anything more. "Best thing you've ever had just because your pride is hurt. Did I ever abuse you in any manner or give you any cause to question my love for you? You got all the affection you wanted, and I made sure you were okay. We are each other's closest confidants, both psychologically and physically. You would have stayed happily in love with me till your death if you hadn't happened upon it. Last breath, you wouldn't have known. Let's go back to the time when I discovered that your love for me isn't as sincere as. You assert that if you known differently, you wouldn't have devoted yourself emotionally and physically to another guy. Was incorrect. Therefore, you withheld it from me. I don't understand why you've been lying to me for 20 years. Just because you've been seeing another man for that long and you've admitted to love him as well. How does sharing intimacy with him, as you have with me, show love for me? Let's ignore the physical moment, if that's even possible. Don't you realize that all of the love you gave him was taken away from me?" Tracy shouted back at me, saying he understood, "But I didn't tell you because I knew you wouldn't, and now you're demonstrating it. I'm aware that he saw that I couldn't have tolerated you having a second partner and a sort of spouse. You made the decision for yourself because I wasn't stupid enough to allow you to do it voluntarily. This was all about. Believe me, I would have had a happy life if I hadn't found out that you could realize your ambitions. You could have etched that on my fucking tombstone here, but you're the greatest idiot." In reality, Rick Avondale believed he was the happiest idiot in the planet and was unaware that his wife had 2 spouses. The viewing and 3 days later, on a Monday, the funeral was held, but I chose to go about my daily business instead of going to work as usual, and when I returned to the kitchen, Tracy and Allison were still dressed for the funeral. I moved to embrace my daughter, who had returned from college for the occasion, but she backed away when Tracy sensed the tension. I would have respected the situation and backed off if she had put her hand on my arm and given me a silent signal for restraint. However, these conditions were far from normal, and I could feel my irritation bubbling up inside of me, even as I growled under my breath. After gathering a few necessities, I quickly packed my luggage and departed before Tracy flooded my phone with calls. Almost quickly after I left, I paid no attention to Allison. Credit didn't sugarcoat the facts. She had already decided that I was the villain in this case, and she was certain. She obviously didn't view me as her father, either emotionally or biologically, so she made me suffer. The following day, I went to the bank and closed the shared credit cards, split our accounts, and put up new ones in my name, and I also scheduled a meeting with the attorney Ari suggested on Thursday. His name was Mike Squelch, and I had been up for 3 days in a row, which made me doubt his legal. Despite my fatigue, I felt there wasn't much to talk about, so I gave him a thorough rundown of the scenario and stated that I wanted to seek a kid as well as swiftly dissolve the marriage and get my due portion. If our daughter was no longer receiving assistance from Jackson's estate, I felt it was only right that the biological. When I informed Mike that I was tired of being taken advantage of, he seemed to agree with my assertion that my father should shoulder the financial responsibility. Plans. But he cautioned that Tracy may face required counseling and drawn-out legal proceedings if she objected to the divorce. Battles. I remained unmoved and told him to follow through on his promise on the. I thought Tracy received the divorce papers around 1:07 a.m. on Monday when they were served to her at work. Mike, our receptionist, informed me a minute later that Tracy had called once more during the. I instructed the May staff to move her calls and messages to my voicemail after I ignored them on my phone for a week. Done that, but after realizing I couldn't stay away from her forever, I requested Marlene, or the head receptionist. You're such a jerk for connecting her calls to me directly. I hung up after. The second call came through 15 seconds after our first outburst. Don't you dare hang up on me. I ended the phone once, especially considering how long it would take her to realize that being civil is essential if she wants to converse. The phone took a little longer to connect with me, and when I answered, she spoke in a soft, tremulous voice as though she was attempting to remain composed. You've won this round, and we should talk, I said with a forced happiness. Get in touch with my lawyer Mike Squashit at X to set up a meeting with us. It might be beneficial for you too. Having your own lawyer in prison might also assist to move things along. I stayed at a nearby motel until the 2 weekly meeting, at which point I returned to my former residence, sometimes to mow the grass, pick up the mail, and get some of my possessions. When Tracy noticed me coming home, when her long-lost spouse arrived, she made an attempt to welcome me for the first time as though I was in the driveway. You didn't need to vent our issues in the driveway, so I shoved her away after she gave me a hug and walked inside. Then she responded, if I'm such a jerk, why don't you just get a divorce? I shot back dryly. At 3 o'clock on a Friday afternoon, I let Tracy leave first since she claimed to love me, but she claimed to still have feelings for Jacku and wondered whether I would be prepared to move on now that he was gone. She said that I was eager to abandon our 20-year marriage since our love meant so little to me. I said that she had my heart in the marriage, and she tricked me to win it, so how could I not? The foundation of a marriage is a violation of trust, and you knew what you were doing was wrong, so you violated my confidence in order to get your mental and physical goals. But he was aware of it and accepted it, so I was duped. I would never have allowed sharing you, and your selfishness and dishonesty are the reason for this divorce, not me. Physically with another guy, but it hurts more when you share your love with someone else since it crosses a much larger line. You just had an affair with someone else. You slept with him, loved him, and even had his kid. The fact that I was unaware of it does not absolve you both of stealing from me. It's fortunate that he passed away from a heart attack that day, because I would have shot him if he hadn't, and Tracy gasped when I said my last words. You never once expressed regret for cheating on me, and I could already feel the tears running down my cheeks. I continued by saying I'm sorry for hurting you, and perhaps you're sorry for getting caught, Rick, but I don't believe that you genuinely regret what you did. Please try to keep our relationship intact. She begged him during the divorce that our marriage was meant to continue forever and that it wasn't just about you and me. Mike looked at Tracy's attorney and stated, I think we're done here. In response to Tracy, your customer must sign the paperwork and send it back to us. The woman, who was of a frickin' descent, was in her mid-40s. A woman from America nodded and held out her hand for Mike to shake. A few minor details were worked out during the course of the following. After a few weeks and 3 months, our divorce was finalized, and I gave Mike instructions to file a lawsuit against Jack's estate, effectively requesting college funding and child support if Allison hadn't made it quite evident at the burial that, after 18 years of raising our kid together, she no longer wanted to be involved with me. I don't know whether I would have followed this path, but I suppose she had 4 years to consider it once Tracy informed her in. When Mike suggested making amends, I didn't take offense since, in her opinion, I was simply an idiot who was wasting real eternal caring. For the loss with actual money, exactly 1 million. I liked Mike's strategy and assumed Chill would call after she was served, but Tracy was in the queue instead. Chill must have assumed that hearing the news via Tracy would make me more receptive. But she was wrong. Is this just another attempt to harm me? Tracy inquired as to how I was doing when I picked up the phone, and she informed me that she was thinking of me and phoning to check on me. Didn't know why she was phoning. But you do realize that this makes you seem somewhat callous, don't you? She said that I spent. For 18 years, I was parenting someone else's child, and even though Chell and Jack made fun of me, the child thought I was an idiot, so I didn't care. Regardless of your thoughts, I hung up the phone without saying goodbye. I assumed Tracy advised me to relax with my attitude that despite trying to negotiate via her lawyer at first, I wasn't interested in. Finally issued me $1 million check, which, as it turned out, Chell could easily pay a few months later. With Jack gone, selling the $8 million to a Japanese corporation was likely a wise decision, but theirs. Further information: 2 days following the sale of Sofal, $211 million was transferred. I received a finder's fee for Nakatomi and completed the transaction within the Cayman Islands into an account in my name. We had agreed that I would get the money for 9 months, regardless of my involvement or the acquisition circumstances. Finished as long as Nakatomi finished the purchase by a specific date. If that date had passed, the transaction was worthless. You may wonder what part 1 played in the Softa transaction. It's a little complicated, but basically, I wasn't totally come up later in this story. Even while a lot of what I've described is grounded in actuality, other aspects were enhanced a performance I gave that was on par with an Oscar-winning performance. I portrayed a character who was totally out of the loop, so allow me to tell you what transpired until around a month before to Jack's death. I had no clue what was happening, but then a Nakatomi lawyer came up to me and asked for my assistance in negotiating a WH. Why do you believe I can assist other from dealing with HC for Seidel? I inquired out of genuine curiosity, because we both know that my wife is closely related to a jock. Because of your intelligence, we think you can overcome the obstacle and benefit from outwitting the. I was shocked, the lawyer said, because Tracy was being a man who has been lying to you for years. Unbelievably, this Japanese person was aware of it and discovered that Nakatomi had completely. After thoroughly investigating a number of businesses, they soon discovered a wealth of personal information on Jack Tracy, and even their daughters. They were correct to believe that I would be inspired to assist them, but they had to act quickly since they were looking at alternative software companies, and I had to take action within 9 months. Initially, they provided me with evidence of Tracy's infidelity, including pictures, videos, phone logs, trip receipts, and more. They offered me an offer even though I already had all the ammo I needed to expose them both. Decent salary, and they offered $2 million to assist them acquire the business from Jock, which I was already inclined to do. To assist without the money reward, but I kept it to myself because my top goal was to plan my course of action and make sure. Since we reside in a no-fault state, the money would come to me following the divorce, preventing any dividing. However, I had to gather myself to prevent prematurely showing my first, albeit brief, hand. My first instinct was to wait until their next meeting to break in and take dramatic action, but the thought of spending my being Bubba's cellmate didn't sit well with me, so I chose to keep my cool and keep acting like I didn't know anything and put the techniques I'd developed over the previous 20 years into effect. I informed Ari of what I learned about. After sipping tequila and talking about solutions, Tracy, Jack, and I stayed up late at the facility. Ari said, "It's ironic that the guy who invented Little had his wife cheating on him after nearly half of the bottle." I kept my revelation to myself since I shouldn't have given it in the first place. But that's when everything finally clicked for me. I considered giving him some of that substance, but I decided against it. That way, I could tackle 2 problems at once. Seidel has fewer contraindications than the majority of other medications, which is one of its advantages. In fact, there are only one problem, is that it effectively stifles a woman's libido and should not be taken by a man at all. mysteriously raises men's blood pressure, and can cause a deadly heart attack. All I had to do was find a way to get it into. The fact that Jaku and I both belong to the same golf club and sometimes play together with two. I organized for us to perform as a group the following Saturday, with a scheduled stop at the restaurant for a relaxed lunch. Following a successful first 9 holes and a relaxed 90, we quickly, before evening for the second 9, we took a break for lunch and beverages. Since I'm good at selling, while we were drinking, I commented to Jack in passing, "You're doing okay, buddy. You seem a bit." Jack was conscious of the age gap because he was 10 years older than the others. He was obviously affected by my inquiry, and I could see him pondering when I proposed delaying our tea time by 30 minutes to give. He answered that he needed more sleep since he was a little exhausted, but that there was no need to modify plans because I would manage. To be honest, I didn't think he was fatigued at all, but I chose to capitalize on his fears of being the group's oldest member by saying, "I have a thing for you." Taking a tiny bag of white, unmarked pills out of my pocket, I keep them for myself because they help me relax and keep. I handed Jack the little bag with the 5 pills, and he took one of them over the course of the day. He took the medication and flushed it down with water. "If you like them, I'll get you more the next time we go golfing." Bourbon smashed his chest like a monkey on the rocks, and he gave a little Tarzan-like shout, "Let's go, guys." Feeling energetic, he is probably feeling the benefits of the tablet within a short period. A rise in blood pressure can give you a lift, which is why athletes focus on getting hyped up for their games, yet too much of a good thing is not a smart idea, especially for those questioning why I offered him a little bag instead of a pill bottle or box. The plan was for him to get rid of the bag once he completed the pills rather than leaving it around where it may be. If someone examined his pockets during the activities that were scheduled to unfold on Wednesday night, those 5. The purpose of the tablets was to last until Wednesday, when Jack and Tracy usually had sex with a man who was already high blood pressure. When combined with blood pressure-raising medicine, the pressure from dating someone other than his wife. Although it would appear to be a typical heart attack, you have the right ingredients for one that is likely to be deadly. Due to their limited resources, our little city's criminal investigation section won't investigate until anything indicates suspicious, so I made sure to behave just like the betrayed spouse. I even shocked myself with my acting abilities when I initially learned about the affair a month ago. Days after the funds arrived in my account and were swiftly moved, I had to acknowledge that I had performed well. I mentioned I was giving AR and his wife a nice supper as a thank you for being a wonderful leader and being faithful to me during my difficult period, but I sincerely wanted to thank him for assisting me in exacting revenge on Jack now that he was no longer in the. Imagine if Tracy and Chell's relationship had soured, particularly since Chell had time to consider Jack's passing. I heard that Chell was quite agitated in Tracy's arms, and I was irritated. Tracy was unable to convince me to abandon the case against the estate for unpaid child support. They didn't seem to understand that Tracy wouldn't have profited from that money as a result of our divorce. After Chill paid my support, he fired Tracy, and word got out inside the Nomi circles about the affair between Jack and Tracy, which basically damaged Tracy's career in business. Administration seems it's not helpful for one's career when the boss dies while in bed with you. Despite the fact that Tracy emerged from it with roughly $1 million, people have advised them not to feel too sorry for her. Although she has been having financial difficulties, Allison has stated that she will be able to support her daughters. After Jock passed away, they no longer desired to interact with me. I guess that's because of all the years I spent raising her, supporting her soccer teams, and going to all of her dance recitals, but I won't be doing that. Error once more. In my opinion, I'm doing pretty well for someone who lost their life partner 20 years ago. I eventually resumed dating after some time, but I'm not sure if I'll ever be completely trusting another woman, and I'm not sure I'll ever find someone who can match the relationship I thought I had with Tracy. I have a net worth of about $5 million and am not bound by any obligations. Went into semi-retirement. However, I am currently retired, though I continue to work on special projects for Mayon. Perhaps one day, I'll even create a medication that helps husbands identify unfaithful wives, which would be this narrative, game changer, helps you consider moral quandaries and the effects of our deeds. Given the importance of forgiveness in general, it's a fascinating voyage through the shadowy recesses of the human psyche.